Everybody knows about Yiddish. Yiddish gets good PR. But very few people know the Jews spoke other languages besides Yiddish. And if you don't speak Yiddish, it doesn't make you are less of a Jew. I remember years ago, somebody said to me, "Start talking to me in Yiddish." I said, "I'm sorry, I don't speak Yiddish." So he said to me, "Aren't you Jewish?" So I was about to ask him other questions about, his whatever. Never mind. I basically kept my mouth shut, and I said, "No. As a matter of fact, I'm a Sephardic Jew." "Oh, you're a Sephardic Jew." Okay, so you got a pass. I mean, yeah. What I want to talk about today about the other language that at one point most of the Jews spoke, and that is Ladino. Ladino is a Romanic Jewish language which was spoken and still is spoken by the descendants of the Spanish Jews and the Jews who were expelled from Spain. Also known in other names as Spaniolit, or Judaismo, or Judeo-Espanol, or Spanish Jewish, or just plain simple Espanol. And what we call hablas español is when we used to say, "Do you speak Ladino?" When we grew up, that's how it was. Espanol, it was the Spanish that we spoke. The other Spanish was Castilian. We spoke Spanish. But however, today Ladino became the main name for this language that was spoken. In the past, this concept of Ladino was reserved only to the language which were used to translate religious literature. And that was at the time written only b'ktav Rashi. With the Rashi script, that's how they wrote Ladino. And you have some books and some Sidurim at home that were written in Ladino. There is some tshuvot of Hamebit and so on and so forth. Some other people of that time, some later sages like Rav Chaim Palachi and so on, that they have a whole responsa written in Ladino. And that was a little different than the language in which they spoke. There was a Spanish, Spaniolit, in which they spoke day to day, which was, we'll see later on, it was mixed with other type of languages, versus the Ladino, there was only a more of a rabbinical type of that dialect. The source of Ladino is really a Castilian dialect. Castilla is a place in Spain. Castilian dialect of Spanish that was spoken around the 15th century. The Jews spoke that language as well. And the Jews mixed within that Castilian dialect also other words in which were more common to them, in words in Hebrew, in Aramaic, and so on and so forth. After 1492, when they spread throughout the region and mainly throughout the Ottoman Empire, some people actually say it should be Osman's Empire, or with a Sa, Osmans. Ladino became a language by itself because it was preserved by the Jews as a way to separate themselves from the other people around, and that's the language they spoke, and it became a language only spoken by Jews, Ladino. Ladino was spoken in the whole area of what we call Asia Minor, that area, in the Balkans, in southern Romania, in northern Africa, places like Tangier and so on and so forth, in the Middle East, in Israel, the land of Israel as well. Ladino was also spoken in Western Europe, but it was a little different. In places like Hamburg, in Germany, England, Holland, France, and Belgium, they didn't really speak Ladino as it's spoken or was spoken in those countries, but rather they spoke more of a Baroque era Spanish or Portuguese, which some of them came from Portugal, and those languages were written in Roman or in English script.
Latin.
Yeah, Latin script. Later on, was for the first one. Later on, the people in those countries, Holland, Belgium, and so on and so forth, abandoned that practice of speaking those languages, and they spoke more of the language of the place itself, whether it was Dutch or German or English and so on and so forth. However, there are remnants for that in certain kilot in that region, where the Haftarah, for example, of Tisha B'Av is still being translated into Spanish or some ancient Spanish, and that's the tradition. Now, the most dominant dialect in Ladino is the Osman dialect, which is Turkish Balkan. And I'm saying Balkan because the Turks control the whole entire area. And we'll see later on in some other time, Be'ezrat Hashem, the different communities like Greece and Yugoslavia and other places like this, or Sarajevo and those places over there. But that dialect was the main one, and it was really split into two different branches. The southern eastern, which was spoken in Turkey, in Rhodes, preserved the Castilian dialects, and the northern western, which was spoken in Greece and Macedonia, in Bosnia, in Serbia, preserved more of the dialect that was spoken in northern Spain and Portuguese. For example, I'll give you an example. In Portuguese, beans, you say feijoadas. Feijoadas, beans, and so on and so forth. The Greek Jews used to call what we call chamin, they used to call it fijon. Fijon. Fijones. Right? Frijoles. But the Spanish Jews, the Sephardic Jews from Rhodes and Turkey, call it avicas or avas, which is more Spanish rather than that. Names like a boy, my son, right? In regular Spanish will be mi hijo, hijo, the J. In our Spanish it will be hijo, and the Greek Jews will call it fijo. It all depends on what. Very interesting how they came about. Believe me, they all understood each other, no problem whatsoever. There was no problem communicating with that whatsoever. And I do believe, regardless of what many people say, you see, Ashkenazi Jews are just as Jews as anybody else. They're not superior to any other form of Jews. But I do believe that the Sephardic Ladino was more of a universal bridge than the Yiddish was, because of the nature of the communities themselves. Both of the sub dialects were really influenced tremendously from Turkish, and also got influence from languages, Slavic languages or Greek languages that were around. For example, in Spanish, you would say you call a watermelon sandia. In Ladino, we call it karpuz. Karpuz is Turkish, that actually come from Turkish Persian, kharbuz. So that's where it comes all about. But that's how they call it karpuz. Melon was always melon. Just the same thing is like this. Interesting. Oranges, in Spanish you say naranja. Naranja. We used to call it Portugal. Portugal from Portugal. Portugal. So it's just very interesting how it was developed and preserved. The Northern African, which has as a special name Hachtiya, was spoken by the Jews in Northern Africa, mainly by the Jewish communities of Spanish Morocco, like Tangier and so on and so forth, which is really close to Spain. That has a different type of influence, and so on and so forth. More towards the 19th century, had started to become more influenced by developments of modern Spanish, and therefore changed. But still, it was not original Spanish. It was a branch of that old Spanish the Jews spoke. In Tunisia, the Ladino was spoken by the community of the immigrants, of mainly Italian Sephardic Jews, because in Italy there were Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews as well. And most of them came from the city of Livorno, and some descendants of the Jews who were expelled from Spain and Portugal, and together they will form a Keilah, which was called the Livoresia, the Livorno community. And that dialect of Spanish that was spoken over there was ancient Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, Hebrew, and Italian. And later on, also because of the French colonialism, it was influence of French as well inside. Unfortunately, that dialect has been completely erased and disappeared because of Arab language dominancy, and they simply forgot how to speak that. But sometimes you can tell the difference in the people from Tunisia, where they one from another base and appearance, but they have no recollection whatsoever of this dialect or how to speak. Most Tunisian Jews today, if they don't speak Hebrew, they speak a form of Arabic, which is the Tunisian Arabic. Regardless of the different so-called, so you see, there's a lot of dialects, as we said previously. There's a high level of linguistic uniform in terms of the language. It was more or less uniform, mainly because of the trades that of the communities one with the other. For example, the Jews from Saloniki traded with the Jews with Rhodes that traded with the Jews of Istanbul, and this one traded with the other one. Jews from Izmir traded with people from Venice, people from Israel. Had a lot of business going over the place, so therefore it was more uniform and so on and so forth. Words and expressions were always exchanged, so therefore you can find some expressions that will be, let's say, Turkish in origin, and then you'll find them in other places as well, without the cultural background of that. People like legends, like folk stories or folklore figures like Juha, right? The funny character, always travel from all over the place, influenced a lot by later on with they used to have like a shadow theater, with the figures. They used to call it like this. In Greek, they call it karayos, right? They play it like this. So they was very influenced by that. Traveled basically all over. Juha became an international ambassador for Sephardic Jews. Very interesting character. Also because of religious, rabbinical communication between them, with questions that they had to ask, and so therefore you'll see that the communication between the Jews was great. Books that were printed in the Ottoman Empire were printed in the Ottoman Empire, were served by those who spoke the Spanish dialect in Northern Africa and Morocco. So they had to communicate very well. during the Holocaust, with the complete wiping out of many Jewish, and I do have to say, Sephardic communities, and it's a part of history that really bothers me. But they just don't talk about that. It's like the Sephardic Jews were not a part of the Holocaust. We were all in it. Really, it doesn't make a difference if you're Sephardic or not. But that part, like, I don't think until the 80s, we started to acknowledge in Israel that some Tunisian and Libyan Jews were transferred to concentration camps in Europe. It was a joke. Nobody thought it was real. We knew about the Saloniki Jews because we lived with the people. I lived with the people. So I knew it. But Libya, nah. Anywhere they went, they packed the Jews and sent them out. So there was a disaster in terms of the people who spoke Ladino, especially in the Balkan areas, mainly speaking in Saloniki, which of course Saloniki was called Yerushalayim de Balkan, Jerusalem of the Balkans. And Ladino was completely erased from those areas. I know people who are descendants or members of family that still live in Greece, mainly most of them intermarried. They don't speak Ladino whatsoever. Even in Turkey, after most of the Jews left Turkey, most of the Turkish Jews, especially the young generation, don't speak Ladino anymore. They speak Turkish. They don't speak Ladino. And a lot of people from those communities took a big hit when, in terms of the Ladino culture and so on and so forth, when Jews from Bulgaria, Turkey, Greece, or Yugoslavia went to Israel. It was a great loss to the Jewish nation that culture was not preserved, because it is a culture of tolerance and moderation. And it's not a culture of extremism and fanaticism. It's not. There was a strength. Unfortunately, when they came to Israel, A, they dropped it. B, they were forced to drop it. C, the institutions in Israel, the state of Israel, not only did it not make an effort to preserve it, but deliberately tried to erase any kind of a memory from those communities. It was always the Eastern European mentality that brought us up to here. Kuchi ve'otzem yadi. Until today. If it wasn't for some people in Cervantes Institute in Spain that tried to revive it, who knows what will happen today? Today, there is somewhat of a revival of awareness of the Ladino culture in Israel, but no more than that. I wonder, we always learn about the Holocaust. People go to we should learn, don't get me wrong. We should go to Auschwitz, Birkenau, Bergen-Belsen. We should go to these places. We should not forget that ever. However, we should not forget something else as well. Why don't we make trips to the ghettos in Spain? To Toledo, to Granada, to Castilla, to Zaragoza, to Barcelona, to all those places where Jews lived and they were butchered. Why did I never hear an apology? Them lousy Turks wanted an apology for killing 9 people at the Marmara, a bunch of terrorists. The government of Spain never said, I'm sorry for the Jews. Why don't we go and visit those places? The cortijos. Cortijos are those courtyards of the Jews lived in, which was amazing. They preserved it also. Everywhere they went, they took Spain with them to preserve their identity, not to get lost. They should make trips to go to Spain, to the ghettos in Spain. You know how How much looting do the Spaniards took from us? Houses, territories, money, lives. You know how many Jews converted to Christianity because of the Morano Jews? They were converted to Christianity in places today like Mexico, and some in Cuba, in South America, in Brazil, in all those places where the Inquisition went. Even in New Mexico, United States, there are families, remnants of Morano Jews. And the problem is that we as Jews do not seem to try to come up with a solution. If there is a person that can prove to you that he's a Morano Jew, you need to do whatever you can to cut all corners that you can to bring him back home to Judaism. Because I heard a line that is like driving me crazy, this line, that the blood of these people is screaming from the earth. And there you go. What are we left today? If you ask most Israelis today, what do you know about Ladino culture? They'll tell you, I don't know, burecas, this, you know. But if they would adopt that model in Israel, we will have a much more tolerant and more, I think, healthier community altogether in Israel. When they moved to Israel, I can tell you this, a lot of the people were embarrassed by the fact that the parents are exiled, because what the Zionists did in Israel would try to, through embarrassment, to show them how backwards their parents were, to create a sense of embarrassment of the people so they would abandon all their heritage. They told them, you don't need tefillin anymore, you don't need to do mitzvot in Eretz Israel. Lo tzarich. And don't tell me they did it. They told it to my parents, to my family. So slowly, it was erased. Today there is some revival. However, this is just the beginning. So remember, let's try to be aware with that. Do some search about Ladino. Bezat Hashem, tomorrow we'll continue.